Hey guys, tonight we begin with something truly unforgettable. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, let's step back in time and experience what it was really like to visit a medieval tavern. The first thing that becomes clear when arriving at a medieval tavern is that it is not simply a place to drink. In the Middle Ages, the tavern stands at the center of everyday life, serving as a meeting point, a shelter, a marketplace of rumors, and a reflection of the world outside its wooden walls. In medieval Europe, especially between the 12th and 15th centuries, taverns exist in nearly every town and along most trade roads. Travelers, merchants, craftsmen, soldiers, and peasants all pass through their doors. A medieval tavern is usually built from timber and stone, depending on the region. In England and Northern Europe, wood dominates, while in parts of France and Italy, stone taverns are more common. The exterior is often modest, with a hanging sign painted with symbols rather than words, since many people cannot read. A tankard, a crown, a boar, or a lion might represent the tavern's name. The entrance is low, forcing most visitors to bend slightly as they step inside. This architectural feature is practical, helping retain warmth in colder seasons. Once inside, the space opens into a large hall, dimly lit by firelight and candles. Smoke lingers in the air because chimneys are primitive or non-existent in many taverns. The smell is heavy, a mixture of wood ash, damp clothing, spilled ale, roasted meat, sweat, and herbs. The tavern keeper, often called the host or innkeeper, holds a respected but cautious position in society. He must balance the demands of travelers with the scrutiny of local authorities. Taverns are regulated places. In many medieval towns, alehouses and taverns require licenses. Inspectors known as ale tasters may be appointed to ensure that the drink is not watered down or overpriced. In medieval England, ale is the most common drink served. Beer with hops becomes widespread later, but early medieval ale is usually unhopped and brewed quickly. It does not last long, so it is consumed fresh. Taverns brew their own ale or purchase it from local brewers, often women known as ale wives. Brewing is one of the few commercial activities widely practiced by women during the Middle Ages. The ale itself is thick, cloudy, and filling. It contains low alcohol compared to modern beer, but it is consumed daily by adults and even children because clean drinking water is not always available. Medieval cities often have contaminated wells and rivers, making fermented beverages safer. A traveler entering the tavern would not expect privacy. The hall is communal. Long wooden benches and trestle tables dominate the room. Guests sit shoulder to shoulder. The social structure of the medieval world appears clearly in seating arrangements. Wealthier patrons sit closer to the hearth or at raised platforms, while poorer laborers remain near the door or along the walls. Food is served in simple forms. Bread is a staple, often coarse and dark for common people, made from rye or barley. White wheat bread is reserved for the wealthy. A tavern meal might include pottage, a thick stew of peas, beans, onions, and herbs. Meat is available, but usually salted pork, sausage, or occasionally roasted chicken for those who can afford it. The utensils are basic. Knives are common, but forks are rare in much of medieval Europe until later centuries. People eat with their hands or use bread as a scoop. Wooden bowls and trenchers, flat pieces of stale bread used as plates, are typical. After the meal, trenchers may be given to the poor or fed to animals. The tavern is loud, not with music at all times, but with voices. People talk, bargain, argue, and exchange news. In a world without newspapers, taverns serve as information centers. Merchants share reports of distant markets. Soldiers speak of conflicts. Pilgrims describe shrines. Local villagers learn about taxes, laws, and royal decrees through tavern conversation. Medieval authorities understand the power of taverns. Some rulers attempt to control them, fearing rebellion or disorder. Yet taverns remain essential. Trade routes depend on them. Travelers need places to rest, eat, and find safety. Along major roads, taverns sometimes function as inns. Inns provide lodging, while taverns mainly serve food and drink, but the line is often blurred. A medieval inn may offer straw bedding in shared rooms. Privacy is rare. Travelers sleep side by side, often fully clothed, with valuables kept close. Horses are equally important. Many taverns have stables or nearby yards where animals can be fed and watered. The quality of a tavern is often judged by how well it treats both traveler and horse. One surprising reality of medieval taverns is the constant presence of regulation. Prices for bread and ale are often fixed by law. In England, the assize of bread and ale, first established in the 13th century, controls the cost and quality of these staples. Tavern keepers who cheat customers can face fines, public humiliation, or loss of license. The tavern is also a place of entertainment. Minstrels, wandering musicians, and storytellers sometimes perform for coins or meals. Games such as dice and board games are common, though gambling is frequently condemned by the church. Despite religious warnings, taverns remain spaces where ordinary people find brief escape from labor. The church views taverns with suspicion. Excess drinking, immoral behavior, and violence are associated with them. Sermons often warn against spending too much time in alehouses. Yet clergy themselves sometimes visit taverns, especially when traveling. The medieval tavern is not always safe. Fights can break out quickly. Weapons such as daggers are common. Tavern keepers may keep rules, but enforcement is difficult. Some taverns hire guards or rely on local watchmen. At the same time, taverns provide rare opportunities for social mixing. A peasant might sit near a merchant. A wandering scholar might share ale with a blacksmith. News, language, and ideas spread through these interactions. The tavern also plays a role in commerce. Deals are made over cups of ale. Contracts are agreed upon verbally, often sealed with handshakes and witnesses. In many towns, guild members gather in taverns for meetings. As evening deepens, candles burn lower. The fire crackles. Outside, streets are dark, with little public lighting. Travelers who do not have lodging must decide whether to stay near the tavern for safety or risk the road at night. Inside, the tavern continues its rhythm. Ale is poured into clay mugs or wooden cups. The host keeps track of payments, sometimes using tally sticks marked with notches. Coins are precious and barter is still common. A traveler may pay with goods, services, or promises of future trade. The medieval tavern is a doorway into the everyday world of the Middle Ages. It reveals how people ate, drank, traveled, and communicated. It shows a society built on community rather than privacy, where survival depends on shared spaces and mutual exchange. As the night continues inside the medieval tavern, the atmosphere becomes a living record of the Middle Ages. The tavern is not simply a backdrop for drinking. It is a stage where social classes, laws, travel, trade, and survival intersect in one crowded hall. The longer one remains inside, the more details emerge. The tavern keeper does not only serve ale, he watches constantly. In medieval society, disorder can quickly bring trouble. Local officials may hold tavern owners responsible for fights, theft, or illegal gatherings. A wise host learns to recognize dangerous strangers, drunk patrons, and tensions before they become violent. The host's family often works alongside him. Medieval taverns are usually family businesses. A wife may handle cooking, serving, or brewing. Children may carry water, clean benches, or run errands. The tavern is not separated from domestic life. Behind the hall, private quarters hold the household's daily existence. In one corner of the room, travelers sit together. They are easy to identify by their cloaks, packs, and dusty boots. Medieval travel is slow and exhausting. Roads are rough, muddy, and often unsafe. Bandits, harsh weather, and illness threaten anyone on the move. For many travelers, the tavern represents temporary security. Merchants are among the most frequent guests. They travel between towns with carts of cloth, spices, metal goods, and wine. Medieval commerce depends heavily on taverns and inns because traders need places to rest, exchange information, and negotiate deals. A merchant in a tavern listens carefully, learning which roads are blocked, which markets are thriving, and which regions face unrest. Pilgrims are another common sight. The Middle Ages witness vast movements of people traveling to shrines such as Canterbury, Santiago de Compostela, or Rome. Pilgrims often wear badges or carry staffs. They rely on taverns and inns for food and shelter. Many taverns develop reputations for welcoming pilgrims, sometimes offering modest meals at lower cost. Soldiers also appear frequently, especially during wartime. In the late medieval period, conflicts such as the 100 Years' War bring armies across Europe. Soldiers may travel in groups, sometimes disciplined, sometimes unruly. Taverns become gathering points where military news spreads quickly. Craftsmen and laborers fill the benches as well. For local villagers, the tavern is one of the few public spaces available for leisure. After long days in fields or workshops, ale provides both nourishment and social connection. Ale remains central to tavern life, but it is not the only drink. Wine is common in southern Europe and among wealthier patrons in the north. Imported wines from France or Spain are expensive, but taverns in major towns may stock them. Mead, made from fermented honey, is also consumed, though less widespread than ale. The serving process is simple. The host draws ale from barrels stored in cool cellars or back rooms. Large taverns may have multiple casks, each with different strengths. Stronger ale costs more. Patrons drink from shared cups in poorer settings, while wealthier guests may have their own vessels. The economic role of the tavern becomes clearer with time. Money exists, but medieval economies still rely heavily on barter and credit. A local farmer might drink now and pay later after harvest. Tavern keepers keep mental records or use tally sticks to mark debts. The tavern is also shaped by strict social expectations. Women may be present, but their roles vary depending on region and class. In many places, respectable women do not frequent taverns alone. Alewives, servers, and entertainers may be viewed differently, sometimes unfairly associated with immorality. Yet women remain essential to brewing and tavern work. Entertainment continues through the evening. A minstrel may arrive carrying a lute or fiddle. Storytelling is one of the great traditions of medieval life. Without widespread literacy, spoken stories are powerful. Tales of kings, crusades, monsters, and miracles circulate through tavern halls. Games are everywhere. Dice, known as hazard, are popular. Board games resembling chess or backgammon appear. Gambling is officially condemned, but it persists. Coins change hands quickly. Arguments sometimes follow, and tavern keepers must intervene before violence erupts. The church's influence is never far away. Religious authorities preach against drunkenness and vice. Yet taverns remain unavoidable parts of medieval society. Even monasteries brew ale, and clergy traveling between parishes often rest in taverns. One of the surprising realities of medieval tavern life is how much politics flows through it. Kings and lords issue proclamations, but common people learn of them through conversation. Rebellions sometimes begin with tavern whispers. Dissatisfaction over taxes, famine, or injustice spreads in these communal spaces. In England, taverns play roles in uprisings such as the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. Though not planned entirely within taverns, these places allow ideas and frustrations to circulate. Crime is another shadow presence. Thieves often target taverns because travelers carry coins. Pickpocketing is common. Tavern keepers sometimes warn guests to keep valuables hidden. Some inns provide locked chests, but trust is limited. The sleeping arrangements in tavern inns reveal another medieval difference. Guests rarely have private rooms unless wealthy. Most sleep in shared chambers or even in the hall itself near the hearth. Straw mattresses cover the floor. Fleas and lice are constant companions. Travelers accept these hardships as normal. Despite discomfort, taverns offer warmth. Medieval homes are cold and public fires are valuable. In winter,
The tavern hearth becomes a gathering place where stories, food, and drink sustain the community. Outside, medieval streets remain dangerous after dark. Town gates may close at night. Curfews exist in many cities. Anyone caught wandering without purpose may face suspicion. Taverns thus become final stopping points before night fully settles. As candles burn down, the tavern keeper begins to reduce serving. Regulations often forbid late-night drinking. Authorities fear disorder. Yet enforcement varies. Some taverns quietly continue for favored patrons. The medieval tavern is both ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary because it is part of daily life. Extraordinary because it contains within it the full complexity of medieval society. It is where the poor and wealthy intersect, where travelers bring distant worlds into local villages, and where survival and leisure blend together. The night inside the tavern continues, revealing deeper layers of medieval culture, including the surprising foods served, the role of secret societies and guild gatherings, and the hidden dangers that linger beyond the tavern door.
As the medieval tavern night stretches onward, the deeper realities of life in the Middle Ages become even clearer. The tavern is not only a social gathering place, it is also a reflection of medieval survival, health, law, and the constant balance between hardship and routine. One of the most overlooked aspects of tavern life is hygiene. Medieval towns and villages do not have modern sanitation. Waste disposal is limited, and streets often contain mud mixed with refuse. Inside the tavern, floors are typically covered with rushes, dried reeds scattered across the ground. These rushes absorb spills, dirt, and moisture, but they are not cleaned frequently. Over time, they become sources of insects and unpleasant smells. Taverns attempt basic cleanliness, but standards differ greatly from modern expectations. Wooden cups and bowls are rinsed, but not sterilized. The same bench may host dozens of travelers each week. Shared sleeping spaces increase the spread of lice and fleas. These realities are simply accepted. Medieval medicine is limited. Illness spreads easily through crowded spaces like taverns. Diseases such as dysentery, influenza, and plague can move along trade routes, carried by travelers stopping at inns. Tavern keepers have little understanding of germs, but they do recognize patterns. They may avoid serving those visibly sick not out of science, but out of fear and superstition. Superstition is deeply woven into medieval tavern culture. Many people believe illness and misfortune come from curses, evil spirits, or divine punishment. Taverns sometimes display religious symbols for protection. Crosses carved into beams or prayers spoken before meals are common. Food in the tavern reveals much about medieval agriculture and trade. Taverns serve what is locally available. In coastal regions, fish is frequent. Inland, salted meat dominates. Fresh meat is expensive because animals are valuable for labor and dairy. When meat is served, it may be heavily spiced, partly for taste, partly to preserve it. Spices themselves are luxury items. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg arrive through long trade routes from Asia. Wealthier taverns in major cities may offer spiced wine or dishes flavored with imported seasonings, signaling status. Vegetables and grains remain the foundation of most meals. Pottage continues as the daily staple, changing depending on season. In summer, it may include herbs and greens. In winter, it becomes heavier with beans and barley. Bread remains central. Medieval bread is not uniform. The poor eat coarse loaves, while nobles enjoy white bread. In taverns, travelers often receive whatever is available. Stale bread is rarely wasted. It becomes trenchers, thickened into stews, or fed to animals. Alcohol consumption is constant, but different from modern drinking culture. Ale is treated as nourishment. It provides calories for laborers. A medieval worker may drink several pints daily, not for intoxication, but for sustenance. The tavern is also deeply connected to law enforcement. Medieval justice is harsh. Local sheriffs, constables, or town watchmen may patrol taverns. Disorder is punished quickly. Fighting can lead to fines, imprisonment, or corporal punishment. Taverns sometimes serve as unofficial courts. Disputes between merchants or villagers may be mediated there. Witnesses gather, agreements are made, and community judgment plays a role. Guilds frequently use taverns as meeting spaces. Medieval guilds control trades such as blacksmithing, weaving, and carpentry. They regulate apprenticeships, wages, and quality. Guild members gather in taverns to discuss business, enforce rules, and celebrate feast days. These gatherings can appear secretive to outsiders. A traveler entering during a guild meeting might sense tension or quiet observation. Taverns are places where alliances form and rivalries deepen. One of the most surprising aspects of medieval tavern life is the presence of storytellers who carry real news disguised as entertainment. In an era when political criticism can be dangerous, minstrels sometimes weave commentary into songs. Tales of corrupt officials, unjust taxes, or heroic rebels circulate in coded form. The tavern thus becomes a place where public opinion forms. Kings may rule from castles, but the voices of common people gather in cavern halls. Religion remains intertwined with tavern culture. Feast days are celebrated with heavy drinking and communal meals. Weddings, harvest festivals, and saint days often bring entire villages into taverns. The tavern becomes a space of community identity. At the same time, moral tension persists. Church authorities condemn drunkenness, gambling, and immoral behavior. Tavern keepers may face pressure to close during certain holy periods. Yet enforcement is inconsistent, and human habits continue. As the night deepens, the tavern's role as shelter becomes more important. Outside, medieval dangers are real. Wolves roam rural roads. Bandits target travelers. In towns, thieves and night watchmen patrol narrow streets. Travelers understand that staying inside the tavern, even with discomfort, is safer than wandering into darkness. The sleeping spaces reveal medieval practicality. Beds are expensive, so taverns provide straw pallets. Wealthier travelers may rent private rooms, but most share. Snoring, coughing, and murmured prayers fill the night. Fire safety is a constant concern. Taverns built of timber are vulnerable. A single spark can destroy an entire block. Tavern keepers monitor hearths carefully. Town regulations often require fires to be banked at night. Despite these hardships, the medieval tavern represents something essential: connection. In a world of isolation, hard labor, and limited communication, the tavern offers shared space. People learn news, find warmth, negotiate survival, and briefly experience social belonging. The medieval tavern is not romantic in the modern sense. It is noisy, smoky, crowded, and harsh. Yet it is also one of the most human places in medieval society, where life unfolds in its most ordinary and revealing form.
As the night settles fully over the medieval town and tavern doors remain bolted against the darkness, the range of characters inside becomes even more apparent. The tavern is not simply filled with farmers and merchants. It is a crossroads of unexpected lives, some ordinary, some dangerous, and some operating quietly beneath the surface of medieval society. Among the most recognizable figures is the wandering scholar. During the later Middle Ages, especially from the 12th century onward, Europe sees the growth of universities in cities such as Paris, Oxford, and Bologna. Students and scholars travel between these centers of learning. Not all are wealthy or disciplined. Some live on limited funds, moving from town to town, offering tutoring, copying manuscripts, or seeking patronage. These individuals often rely on taverns for lodging and cheap meals. A scholar in a tavern can be identified by his clothing, sometimes a worn academic robe, and by the Latin phrases woven into his speech. Latin is the language of education in the church. In taverns, this creates a curious dynamic. Most common patrons cannot understand Latin, yet they recognize it as the language of authority and religion. The presence of a scholar adds both prestige and suspicion. Some scholars are known for writing satirical poems about tavern life itself. The Carmina Burana, a collection of medieval Latin poems, contains verses celebrating drinking, gambling, and the unpredictability of fortune. These works reflect a reality in which taverns inspire art, even as religious leaders criticize excess. Another frequent presence is the professional messenger. Medieval kingdoms depend on couriers to carry official letters and decrees. These riders travel long distances and stop at taverns along established routes. Because they carry sensitive information, they are often careful with their words. Yet observant patrons may notice seals on their satchels or insignia on their cloaks, signaling connections to noble households. Taverns also host individuals operating outside the law. Outlaws and fugitives sometimes blend into crowds, using the noise and anonymity of taverns as cover. Medieval law enforcement is limited. Identification systems are non-existent beyond physical recognition. A person can change towns and, if careful, begin again under a different name. Spies move quietly through taverns as well. During periods of war or political tension, rival kingdoms seek information about troop movements, trade supplies, and alliances. Taverns are ideal listening posts. A careless soldier boasting of military plans or a merchant complaining about shortages can reveal valuable details. The medieval tavern is therefore not only a social center, but an information network. Words spoken casually at a wooden table can travel far beyond the room. Another notable figure is the traveling performer. Beyond minstrels, there are jugglers, acrobats, and storytellers who depend entirely on public gatherings. These performers draw crowds, increasing a tavern's profits. Some specialize in heroic epics, recounting battles and legendary kings. Others perform comic tales about foolish nobles or clever peasants. Entertainment in taverns often carries subtle social commentary. In a rigid society structured by class, storytelling allows common people to hear narratives in which wit overcomes wealth or power. These themes resonate in crowded halls where laborers sit beside traders. Medical practitioners occasionally appear as well. Barber surgeons who perform basic surgical procedures such as bloodletting or tooth extraction travel between towns. They may use taverns as temporary workplaces, offering services to patrons. Medieval medicine operates under theories such as the balance of humors, and bloodletting is believed to restore health. It is not unusual for a tavern to host both drinking and minor medical treatment under the same roof. Merchants dealing in rare goods find opportunity in taverns as well. Items such as foreign fabrics, small religious relics, spices, or metal tools may be displayed discreetly. In a time without storefront advertising, personal interaction drives commerce. A merchant's reputation spreads through conversation. Women in taverns continue to occupy complex roles. Some are respected alewives who manage brewing operations with skill. Others may be traveling vendors or widows supporting families through tavern work. Medieval records show that women frequently brew ale in urban areas, though over time, brewing becomes more male-dominated as it turns commercialized. Contrary to some modern portrayals, taverns are not constant scenes of uncontrolled chaos. Most function under practical discipline. Regular patrons know each other. Reputation matters deeply in medieval communities. A tavern known for frequent violence risks losing customers and facing legal consequences. Still, tension always lingers. Weapons are part of everyday attire. Knives hang from belts, and some travelers carry swords. Disputes over gambling, insults, or unpaid debts can escalate quickly. Tavern keepers develop strategies to prevent escalation, including separating rivals or cutting off alcohol service. Firelight casts shifting shadows across timber beams. Candles burn low. The air grows thick with smoke and conversation softens into smaller clusters. Some patrons begin preparing to sleep, arranging cloaks as blankets. Beyond the walls, medieval nightlife continues differently than modern expectations. There are no streetlights illuminating entire districts. Town watchmen patrol with lanterns, calling out the hours to signal order. In some cities, curfews require citizens to remain indoors after certain times.
The tavern becomes one of the few places where light and warmth remain steady. For travelers arriving late, the glow from its windows signals refuge. One often overlooked reality is the economic vulnerability of tavern keepers. Crop failures, wars, or plagues can devastate business. During outbreaks of disease, travel decreases sharply. Taverns depend heavily on steady movement of people. The Black Death in the 14th century, for example, disrupts trade routes and reduces populations dramatically. Many taverns close permanently during such crises. Yet taverns also adapt. After population declines, labor shortages increase wages for surviving workers. Economic patterns shift, and taverns adjust prices and services accordingly. The medieval tavern exists within a constantly changing world. It reflects agricultural cycles, political shifts, and trade expansions. When new trade routes open, taverns near them thrive. When wars erupt, some taverns become crowded with soldiers, while others suffer from destroyed roads. As the final hours of the night approach, silence gradually replaces noise. The hearth burns low. The tavern keeper makes final rounds, ensuring doors are secured and candles extinguished. Those sleeping in shared rooms settle into uneasy rest. Outside, the medieval world waits for dawn. The tavern, though ordinary in structure, has revealed itself as one of the most revealing spaces of the Middle Ages. Within its walls gather scholars, merchants, pilgrims, performers, spies, laborers, and fugitives. It serves as shelter, marketplace, court, stage, and news center all at once.
Dawn approaches slowly in the medieval world. There are no alarm clocks, no electric lights flickering on to announce morning. Instead, the first signals come from outside the tavern walls. A rooster calls from a nearby yard. Church bells begin to ring for early prayers. The sky lightens gradually from deep blue to gray. Inside the tavern, movement begins before full daylight. Travelers who must cover long distances rise early. Roads are safest and most productive in daylight. Those heading toward market towns or major trade routes cannot afford delay. The sleeping hall stirs with quiet sounds. Cloaks are folded. Boots are pulled back on. Belts are tightened. The straw bedding, flattened overnight, is shaken out or pushed aside. The air is cool, carrying the fading scent of last night's smoke. The tavern keeper is already awake. Running a medieval tavern requires discipline. Fires must be rekindled from embers preserved overnight. Water must be drawn from wells. Morning food preparation begins early, often starting with bread and pottage reheated from the previous day. Breakfast in a medieval tavern is simple. Bread, ale, and sometimes cheese form the foundation. Morning ale is common, not as indulgence but as a routine source of nourishment. In colder months, warm pottage is served to provide energy for travel or labor. Travelers gather near the hearth for warmth. The early hours are quieter than the previous night. Conversations are practical, focused on routes, weather, and distance. Information exchanged at dawn is often more strategic than the storytelling of evening. Merchants consult one another about road conditions. News of washed-out bridges, bandit sightings, or military patrols shapes decisions. Medieval travel depends heavily on shared intelligence. Without printed maps widely available, directions rely on memory and word of mouth. The tavern functions as a checkpoint in this informal network. A merchant leaving town carries with him the information gained overnight. In this way, taverns become nodes in a web stretching across regions and kingdoms. The stable yard becomes active as well. Horses are brushed down, fed oats or hay, and given water. A horse's condition can determine the success of a journey. Many taverns earn steady income by providing reliable stabling. A traveler judges a tavern's quality not only by its food, but by the care given to his animal. Payments are settled in the morning. Coins exchange hands carefully. Medieval currency varies widely by region. Silver pennies are common in England. Larger denominations appear in major trade centers. Some payments are still recorded as credit, particularly for local patrons. Tavern keepers maintain mental records of trusted customers.
Reputation is everything. A traveler known for reliability receives better treatment than a stranger whose background is unknown. As guests depart, the tavern transitions into its daytime rhythm. Not all patrons leave. Local laborers may arrive mid-morning for brief breaks. In towns, craftsmen working nearby use taverns as places to discuss contracts or take midday meals. The tavern does not close during daylight. Instead, its character shifts. The loud storytelling and gambling of night give way to commerce and routine exchange. Supplies must be managed constantly. Brewing is ongoing. In many taverns, ale is brewed in small batches. Large wooden vats sit in back rooms. The brewing process requires grain, water, yeast, and time. Ale spoils quickly without modern preservation methods. The tavern keeper must calculate demand carefully. Grain arrives from local farmers. Barley is most common. The relationship between tavern keeper and farmer is mutual. A successful harvest means abundant brewing. A failed harvest threatens both food supply and drink production. Food preparation continues through the morning. Meat, if available, may be salted or hung to dry. Vegetables are chopped for stew. Herbs are gathered for flavor and simple medicinal use. In some taverns, especially in larger towns, bakers deliver fresh bread daily. In smaller villages, bread may be baked on site in communal ovens. The smell of baking bread mixes with wood smoke, signaling readiness for the day ahead. Authorities may visit during daylight hours. Ale tasters inspect quality and measure prices. Officials ensure that taverns follow regulations. Inspections are not rare events, but routine components of medieval urban management. Religious observance shapes daily patterns as well. Church bells mark hours of prayer. On certain feast days, taverns prepare for larger crowds. On solemn religious days, drinking may decrease, though rarely disappears entirely. The tavern's physical maintenance is constant. Rushes on the floor are replaced periodically, benches are repaired, barrels are sealed, timber beams are checked for weakness. Medieval buildings require continuous care, especially those exposed to fire and heavy use. By midday, the tavern has transformed again. New travelers arrive, some dusty from road travel, others fresh from nearby towns. The cycle repeats with new faces and new information. The medieval tavern operates within a rhythm tied closely to the natural world. Daylight determines activity. Seasons influence menu and traffic. Harvest times bring celebration and increased drinking. Winter months slow travel but increase reliance on communal warmth. Unlike modern establishments driven by advertising or branding, medieval taverns rely almost entirely on reputation. Word of mouth spreads news of good service, fair prices, or dangerous conditions. A tavern's survival depends on maintaining balance between profit and order. The surprising reality is how stable this institution remains across centuries. While kings rise and fall, wars reshape borders, and plagues devastate populations, the tavern continues functioning. Its form may evolve, but its purpose remains consistent, providing food, drink, shelter, and shared space. As the sun climbs higher, the tavern prepares once more for evening. Supplies are counted, fires are adjusted. The host anticipates another night of stories, deals, laughter, tension, and survival. The medieval tavern reveals that history is not only written in castles and battlefields, it is written in wooden halls filled with ordinary people navigating extraordinary times.
As the cycle of another day begins to repeat inside the medieval tavern, it becomes clear that this institution is more than a temporary shelter for travelers or a gathering place for villagers. Over centuries, the tavern quietly shapes economic systems, communication networks, political change, and the foundations of modern public life. By the late Middle Ages, taverns are deeply embedded in European society. In growing towns across England, France, the German states, and Italy, they are no longer rare roadside stops, but permanent urban fixtures. Streets in commercial districts often contain multiple taverns, each with its own clientele and reputation. Some cater to merchants dealing in long-distance trade. Others serve primarily laborers or sailors in port cities. In London by the 15th century,
Taverns and inns cluster along the Thames, supporting river traffic and international commerce. Wine taverns appear alongside alehouses, reflecting England's increasing trade with continental Europe. The medieval tavern gradually contributes to the standardization of hospitality. Practices such as maintaining guest registers, securing stables, offering predictable meal times, and charging structured fees begin to form expectations. These customs lay the groundwork for the later development of regulated inns and eventually hotels. The architecture of taverns also evolves. Earlier wooden halls with central hearths slowly give way to buildings with chimneys and partitioned rooms. Urban regulations encourage safer construction methods to reduce fire risk. Over time, separate chambers for sleeping become more common, especially for wealthier travelers. The influence of taverns extends beyond physical structure. They shape the concept of the public house, a place where unrelated individuals gather under shared rules. This idea becomes foundational in Western society. Taverns provide one of the earliest consistent examples of semi-public space, privately owned yet socially open. Political conversation within taverns has lasting consequences. Throughout medieval and early modern Europe, rulers recognize that public opinion often forms in these spaces. Laws regulating taverns continue to expand. Some governments attempt to limit gatherings or monitor speech, yet complete control proves impossible. During periods of unrest, taverns frequently become organizing points. In later centuries, revolutions and reform movements draw energy from similar public houses. The culture of discussion established in medieval taverns continues into coffee houses of the 17th century and eventually into modern civic forums. Economically, taverns support agricultural cycles. Farmers depend on taverns to sell surplus grain for brewing. Breweries expand from small household operations into larger commercial enterprises. By the end of the medieval period, brewing guilds exist in many cities, formalizing production standards. Women's role in brewing changes significantly over time. Early medieval brewing is often domestic and female-led. As brewing becomes more profitable and regulated, it increasingly shifts into male-dominated guild systems. This transition reflects broader economic centralization occurring across Europe. Trade routes strengthen through tavern networks. Reliable stopping points encourage merchants to travel farther. Over generations, these routes expand into international trade corridors. Taverns located strategically along these paths prosper and contribute to regional growth. Even legal systems are influenced. Written contracts become more common, but oral agreements sealed in taverns remain valid in many communities. Witnesses present during tavern negotiations may later testify in local courts. In this way, taverns indirectly support commercial law development. Culturally, the medieval tavern shapes storytelling traditions that survive centuries. Ballads, legends, and folk tales circulate first through spoken word in tavern halls, before appearing in written collections. Literary works such as Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales reflect this environment, depicting pilgrims sharing stories during travel, a scenario deeply connected to tavern culture. The atmosphere of shared narrative, competitive storytelling, and social observation influences later theatrical traditions. Playwrights draw from tavern characters, accents, and situations. The tavern becomes a stage both literal and symbolic. As Europe transitions towards the Renaissance, urban populations grow. Literacy gradually increases. Printed pamphlets and books begin to circulate. Yet taverns remain central to information exchange. Even as written news expands, oral discussion continues to define communal understanding. The physical experience of entering a medieval tavern, a low doorway, smoky air, wooden benches, communal tables, may fade with architectural progress, but its essence survives. Modern restaurants, pubs, and inns inherit its core purpose, gathering strangers under shared structure for nourishment and exchange. By examining what it truly was to visit a medieval tavern,
a deeper understanding of the Middle Ages emerges. The era is often imagined only through castles, knights, and grand battles. Yet most people did not live in castles or command armies. They worked fields, crafted goods, traded goods, and sought warmth at the end of long days. The Tavern reveals this everyday reality. It shows how communities sustained themselves through cooperation, conversation, and commerce. It exposes the constant negotiation between regulation and freedom, faith and indulgence, safety and risk. It also highlights resilience. Medieval life includes famine, war, plague, and economic uncertainty. Despite these hardships, taverns reopen each day. Fires are rekindled. Ale is brewed again. Travelers continue to move across landscapes shaped by both danger and opportunity. Standing in a medieval tavern at the close of the 14th century, one witnesses the quiet continuity of history. Outside, kingdoms rise and fall. Exploration begins pushing beyond known horizons. New trade routes will soon reshape economies entirely. Yet inside, the familiar rhythm persists. Bread served, ale poured, news exchanged. The medieval tavern does not disappear with time. It evolves. In England, it becomes the public house. In continental Europe, it transforms into cafes and inns. In the American colonies, centuries later, taverns play crucial roles in organizing communities, spreading revolutionary ideas, and supporting expanding frontiers. The DNA of the medieval tavern crosses the Atlantic. Early American taverns mirror many of the same functions: lodging, meeting space, political discussion, and news exchange. The roots of that institution trace back directly to the timber halls of medieval Europe. What it was like to visit a medieval tavern is not merely a curiosity about old wooden buildings and cloudy ale. It is a window into the foundations of public life as it developed over centuries. The firelight may have been dim, the floors may have been rough, the air may have carried smoke and noise, but within those walls, society connected, adapted, and endured. And as history moved forward, the spirit of the medieval tavern moved with it, reshaped, modernized, but never entirely lost.
Even after understanding the legacy and long historical impact of medieval taverns, the experience itself remains so layered that it continues beyond any simple conclusion. The medieval tavern is not only an institution of the past, but also a setting where countless real lives unfolded in ordinary detail. To continue the journey deeper, it becomes necessary to return once more into the tavern hall, not as an abstract symbol, but as a lived environment filled with routine moments that shaped medieval existence. A medieval tavern in the late 14th century stands as a fully functioning organism within its town. Its walls contain more than food and drink. They contain schedules, obligations, labor systems, and the daily pressures of survival. Every object inside has a purpose. Every sound belongs to a larger structure of medieval life. The benches are scarred from decades of use. Knife marks line the wooden surfaces where travelers have cut bread and meat. These marks are not random. They are traces of a world where furniture is not disposable, where a tavern table may last generations. In modern life, such wear might be replaced quickly. In medieval society, it becomes part of continuity. The hearth remains the central feature. Fire is not merely comfort. Fire is technology. It cooks food, provides warmth, allows light, and signals safety. Control of fire is essential. The tavern keeper maintains it carefully, understanding that fire is both necessity and threat. A stray spark can destroy an entire street. Town laws often demand vigilance, especially in crowded urban districts. The kitchen behind the hall operates with constant activity. Food preparation is labor-intensive. There are no refrigerators, no packaged goods, no standardized ingredients. Every meal depends on what is available locally and seasonally. A tavern's menu is not fixed but fluid. The cook adjusts daily based on supply. Grain deliveries arrive in sacks carried by laborers. Meat is brought salted or smoked. Fresh vegetables appear in summer but fade in winter. Herbs are valuable not only for flavor, but also for preservation and basic healing. In this environment, tavern life is shaped by scarcity. Nothing is wasted. Stale bread becomes trenchers. Leftover stew is reheated. Bones are boiled for broth. Even spilled ale is regretted because grain is precious. The tavern keeper's role is part entrepreneur, part guardian, part negotiator. He must manage supplies, handle customers, deal with inspectors, and maintain order. He exists under pressure from multiple directions: local authorities, church expectations, customer demands, and economic unpredictability. In many medieval towns, taverns are required to follow strict pricing rules. Ale cannot be sold at arbitrary cost. Bread cannot be overpriced. The tavern keeper's profit margins are often narrow. Survival depends on volume of customers and steady trade routes. Travelers remain essential. A tavern located near a bridge, market square, or crossroads thrives. One positioned on an abandoned road declines. Geography determines success. As the day progresses, the tavern becomes a shifting space of occupation. Morning brings merchants and messengers. Midday brings craftsmen and villagers. Evening brings entertainment seekers and travelers settling in for the night. Each group reshapes the atmosphere. The social layering is constant. A wealthy merchant may occupy a favored seat near the fire, receiving better ale or meat. A poor laborer may sit closer to the door with cheaper bread and weaker drink. Yet they share the same air, the same roof, the same communal structure. This proximity is one of the defining realities of medieval taverns. Privacy is rare. Social boundaries exist, but they are crossed constantly through shared space. The tavern is also where medieval time is experienced collectively. Without personal clocks, time is measured by bells, sunlight, and routine. Taverns operate according to these rhythms. The midday bell may signal mealtime. Evening darkness signals closure. Feast days signals celebration. On feast days, taverns become crowded beyond normal capacity. Villagers arrive after church services. Drinking increases. Music becomes more frequent. Food portions may expand slightly. The tavern transforms into a communal hall of celebration. Yet even in celebration, regulation persists. Excessive disorder risks punishment. Town watchmen may patrol more heavily. Tavern keepers must maintain a balance between festivity and control. One of the most remarkable elements of medieval tavern life is how deeply it connects to storytelling as a social function. Stories are not entertainment alone. They are education, memory, and identity. A traveler describing distant lands expands the mental world of villagers who may never leave their region. A merchant speaking of foreign spices or markets introduces economic awareness. A soldier recounting war spreads political confirmation. A pilgrim describing shrines reinforces religious imagination. These narratives create shared understanding of a wider world. The tavern is therefore one of the primary spaces where medieval globalization begins in cultural form. Even before modern exploration, taverns allowed distant regions to exist within conversation. The tavern also serves as a site of emotional restraint rather than romantic drama. Medieval life is harsh. People do not gather simply for pleasure, but for practical survival. The tavern offers warmth, calories, and information. Its social role is functional. Violence remains a possibility, but it is not constant chaos. Most tavern nights pass with routine order. Fights occur, but they are exceptions shaped by alcohol, rivalry, or desperation. Tavern keepers develop reputations based on safety. A tavern known for disorder loses travelers. Reputation spreads quickly along roads. Medieval travelers depend heavily on oral networks of trust. As the night returns once more, candles are lit. Shadows grow across timber beams. The hall fills again. The tavern becomes what it has always been, a
a space where medieval society gathers in compressed form. In this crowded room, the Middle Ages are not distant or abstract. They are immediate. The smell of smoke, the taste of ale, the scrape of benches, the murmur of voices all represent the lived reality of an era often misunderstood. The medieval tavern is not a fantasy setting. It is a practical institution built from necessity. It reflects hardship, resilience, commerce, community, and the slow evolution of public life. Even centuries later, the tavern's structure remains recognizable. Modern Americans stepping into a neighborhood bar, a roadside diner, or a bustling cafe still participate in a distant echo of medieval tradition. Strangers gathering in shared space, exchanging news, consuming food and drink, and briefly forming community. The medieval tavern was one of the first enduring spaces where society met itself face to face, day after day, generation after generation. And in that sense, visiting a medieval tavern was not simply an evening activity, it was an encounter with the living center of medieval life itself.
To understand the medieval tavern completely, it helps to remain inside for one full evening in real time, observing events as they unfold from late afternoon until the final ember fades. Imagine an English market town in the late 14th century. The harvest season has recently ended. Trade is steady. The roads are active but not overcrowded. The tavern stands near the marketplace, close enough to attract merchants, but far enough from the church to avoid constant clerical supervision. The sun begins to lower. Farmers return from fields carrying tools across their shoulders. A pair of merchants arrive with a small wagon of wool bundles. The tavern door opens repeatedly as boots scrape against the wooden threshold. The keeper stands behind a thick oak counter. Barrels rest along the wall, sealed with wooden pegs. Ale is drawn fresh. It pours cloudy and pale into a wooden mug. There is no foam like modern beer, only a soft froth that settles quickly. The taste is mild, slightly sour from rapid fermentation. It is filling rather than sharp. At one long table, 3 local craftsmen sit together. A blacksmith with soot-stained hands, a cooper who shapes barrels for breweries, and a tanner whose trade carries a strong scent even after washing. Their conversation centers on prices. Iron has become slightly more expensive. Leather shipments have been delayed. The cooper complains that too many taverns require new barrels at once. Across the hall, a merchant from York speaks quietly with a cloth trader. They discuss wool exports to Flanders. The English wool trade dominates much of Northern Europe's textile industry during this period. Taverns play a quiet role in sustaining these conversations. Deals often begin informally over drink before being formalized elsewhere. A traveler wearing a pilgrim's badge settles near the hearth. He carries a staff and a satchel containing simple possessions. He orders bread and pottage. He does not speak loudly, but when asked about his journey to Canterbury, he answers clearly, describing crowded roads and shrines filled with candles. A young serving girl moves between tables carrying trenchers of stew. Her steps are practiced. She knows which patrons tip fairly and which require reminders to settle debts. Tavern service requires memory as much as speed. As twilight deepens, 2 musicians enter. One carries a fiddle, the other a small drum. They're not permanent employees, but familiar visitors. The tavern keeper nods approval. Entertainment increases business. The musicians begin softly, testing rhythm before building into fuller melodies. Music in a medieval tavern is not constant background noise, it is an event. Patrons pause slightly as they listen. Some tap hands against tables in rhythm. A few join in song if the tune is known. The door opens again. 2 mounted men step inside, cloaks heavy with road dust. Their belts carry short swords. They identify themselves as guards traveling between towns. Their presence shifts the mood slightly. Weapons are normal, but authority carries weight. The tavern keeper greets them respectfully and offers stronger ale. Outside, darkness now covers the town. Torches flicker along the main street. The market square empties except for a few late vendors packing goods. Inside, the tavern grows warmer and louder.
Smoke gathers near ceiling beams. Candles illuminate faces unevenly. Shadows stretch and move with every gesture. Dice appear on a small side table. Two younger men begin a game. Coins clink against wood. The stakes are modest but meaningful. Gambling in taverns is common despite church disapproval. It is part of social life, regulated more by custom than by law in smaller towns. The blacksmith shares news of a nearby village repairing its bridge. This detail matters. Merchants listen carefully. A repaired bridge shortens travel by miles. Information like this spreads through tavern talk long before official announcements reach distant areas. The musicians pause to drink. In their place, an older man begins telling a story about a winter famine decades earlier. His voice is steady, factual. He describes failed harvests, rising bread prices, and how taverns became ration centers rather than places of leisure. His account is not dramatic, but it reinforces memory. Taverns preserve collective experience. Ale continues flowing, but not uncontrollably. The tavern keeper watches levels carefully. Overserving invites conflict. He has seen arguments escalate before. Prevention is part of his trade. Near the door, a traveling peddler quietly opens a small cloth bundle, displaying metal brooches and sewing needles. He does not shout. He shows items discreetly to interested buyers. Taverns often function as informal marketplaces after dark. As the evening advances, the guards begin discussing patrol routes. They mention rumors of bandits along a forested road. Several patrons fall silent, absorbing the information. Tomorrow's travel plans may change because of this conversation. The pilgrim finishes his meal and moves closer to the hearth. He listens more than he speaks. Pilgrims carry stories from many towns. Though modest in appearance, they often possess broad geographic awareness. A dispute briefly arises at the dice table. One player accuses another of unfair throwing. Voices sharpen. The tavern keeper approaches immediately. He does not shout, he simply stands between them, reminding both of house rules. Coins are counted again, the tension dissolves. Such moments are common and managed quickly. Hours pass. Some patrons leave for nearby homes. Others prepare to sleep upstairs in shared rooms. The merchants request space in the stable yard for their wagon. The tavern keeper assigns a stable boy to secure the animals. Candles burn lower, music fades. The final mugs are filled. Eventually, the tavern quiets. The guards retire to a corner chamber. The pilgrim rolls into his cloak near the hearth. The craftsmen depart into dark streets lit only by distant lanterns. In this single evening, nearly every element of medieval life is passed through the tavern door. Trade negotiation, travel planning, local labor concerns, security updates, entertainment, memory sharing, and basic nourishment. The tavern has functioned as inn, marketplace, news station, dining hall, and social mediator all at once. This was not an unusual night. It was ordinary, and that is precisely what makes it historically powerful. Because in these ordinary nights, repeated thousands of times across centuries and across Europe, the structure of medieval society quietly sustained itself. One wooden mug, one shared story, and one guarded doorway at a time.
To go even deeper, the setting now shifts to a specific and historically grounded environment, a London tavern in the late 1400s, near the end of the Wars of the Roses. England is politically unstable. Noble families have struggled for the crown for decades. Yet daily life continues, and within the crowded streets of London, taverns remain steady anchors of routine. The tavern stands not far from the Thames River, where ships unload wool, wine, timber, and imported goods from across Europe. The air outside carries the scent of water, tar, fish, and wet rope. Barges move slowly along the river. Dock workers shout as crates are carried inland. Inside the tavern, the scene reflects London's growing complexity. This is no small village alehouse. It is larger, louder, and more commercially connected. Its signboard swings above the street, painted with a red lion, a symbol visible to both literate and illiterate passers-by. The interior is divided into sections. The main hall holds long communal tables, but a side chamber provides slightly more privacy for merchants conducting serious business.
This structural separation reflects urban growth. As cities expand, taverns adapt to serve different social layers more deliberately. Wine is more common here than in rural towns. Imports from Gascony and the Rhineland flow into London through established trade routes. Wealthier patrons request wine instead of ale, though ale remains the drink of the working population. Near the entrance, river laborers gather. Their clothing is rough and damp from dock work. They drink quickly, speaking in direct, practical tones. Their concerns revolve around cargo schedules and wages. Deeper inside, a group of wool merchants sit around a heavy oak table. England's wool trade continues to shape the economy. These men discuss shipments bound for Flanders. They reference tariffs, royal taxes, and shifting political alliances that may affect export stability. Politics in London taverns during this period is not abstract. The Wars of the Roses have directly affected trade and governance. Loyalty to York or Lancaster once divided nobles, and even common citizens carry quiet opinions. Yet open declarations are cautious. Speaking too boldly about royal matters can invite trouble. The tavern keeper understands this tension. He allows discussion, but intervenes if voices grow too sharp. In cities especially, taverns are monitored more closely. Spies and informants are not myths but realities in unstable times. A man in modest but clean clothing enters carrying writing materials. He is a scrivener, someone who writes letters and contracts for those who cannot write themselves. Taverns in London often serve as informal offices. A merchant needing documentation may hire a scrivener on the spot. Transactions are drafted by candlelight. The presence of literacy slowly increases in cities. Printed materials have begun appearing in England following William Caxton's introduction of the printing press in the late 1470s. Though books remain expensive, pamphlets and notices circulate more widely than before. Taverns become places where such printed sheets are read aloud to groups. In one corner, a man reads from a small printed page describing trade developments abroad. Others listen carefully. The blending of oral and printed culture strengthens taverns as centers of information exchange. Upstairs, lodging rooms are more structured than in rural inns. London taverns serving travelers often provide partitioned chambers, though still shared by multiple guests. Beds are stuffed with straw mattresses covered by coarse linens. Security is tighter in urban taverns. The city imposes curfews. Watchmen patrol the streets with lanterns and halberds. After a certain hour, tavern doors are closed firmly. Late arrivals must knock and justify entry. Food offerings reflect London's access to imports. In addition to bread and pottage, taverns near the river may serve salted cod, oysters, or small river fish. Spices are slightly more accessible here due to trade networks. A pair of apprentices sit together, recently freed from a day's work under strict masters. Apprenticeship systems define much of urban life. These young men are bound to trades for years, learning craft and discipline. Taverns offer one of their few outlets for socialization. Guild influence is strong in London. Many taverns are associated unofficially with specific guilds. Members gather regularly to discuss standards, disputes, and regulations. In this environment, the tavern is not merely a public space, but an extension of organized economic power. As evening advances, a storyteller begins recounting tales of battles between rival noble houses. He does not praise one side openly. Instead, he frames the narrative as history rather than opinion. Listeners interpret meaning cautiously. A royal messenger briefly enters, dust-covered and purposeful. He drinks quickly and departs. His presence alone generates speculation. Political tension lingers in such details. The tavern keeper maintains careful order. In London, fines for disorder can be heavy. Records from the period show that tavern keepers are held responsible for disturbances occurring under their roofs. Despite political instability, routine remains stable. Ale is poured. Wine is measured. Accounts are recorded. Merchants negotiate quietly. The London tavern demonstrates how medieval institutions adapt to urban density and political complexity. Compared to rural taverns, it operates with greater oversight, broader trade access, and sharper awareness of authority. Outside,
The Thames reflects torchlight. Ships rest against wooden piers. The city, though turbulent in its leadership, continues functioning through everyday systems like this tavern. As midnight approaches, doors are barred, candles dim. Upstairs, merchants sleep lightly, guarding coin pouches beneath pillows. Downstairs, the hearth is reduced to glowing embers. In this London tavern of the late 1400s, medieval life reveals itself at the edge of transition. The medieval era is slowly shifting toward early modern transformation. Printing spreads. Exploration looms on the horizon. Royal power will soon consolidate more firmly under the Tudors. Yet inside the tavern, the core remains unchanged. Shared space, shared drink, and shared information. The medieval tavern, whether in a quiet village or in the growing capital of England, continues to anchor society in its most practical form. And from these crowded wooden halls, the structure of public life moves steadily forward into the modern world.
The journey now shifts once again, leaving London behind and crossing the Channel into France during one of the most defining conflicts of medieval Europe, the 100 Years' War. This long struggle between England and France lasts from the 14th into the 15th century, shaping not only royal politics, but also the daily lives of ordinary people. In northern France, near a fortified town along a contested road, a tavern operates under the constant shadow of war. Unlike the urban commercial taverns of London, this tavern is both a refuge and a vulnerable target. Roads are dangerous, armies move unpredictably, villages suffer raids, taxation, and uncertainty. The tavern stands outside the town walls, positioned near a crossroads where merchants once traveled freely. Its structure is partly stone, partly timber, built for endurance. The sign above the entrance shows a painted chalice, signaling drink and shelter to those passing through. Inside, the atmosphere is more restrained. Conversation is quieter. Travelers here do not speak openly about politics because allegiances are dangerous. A wrong word can invite suspicion, especially in regions where control shifts between English and French forces. The tavern keeper is cautious. He has seen soldiers arrive demanding supplies without payment. He has seen refugees seeking shelter after villages were burned. His business survives by balancing hospitality with survival. Ale is still served, but wine is more central in France. Even common taverns provide rough local wine, diluted at times to stretch supply. Vineyards remain productive in many regions, though war disrupts trade routes. Food is simpler than in prosperous cities. Bread, onions, and stew form the base of meals. Meat is scarce. Livestock is often requisitioned by armies. Taverns rely heavily on whatever local farmers can spare. As evening begins, a group of displaced villagers enters. They carry bundles of possessions, moving away from unsafe countryside. Taverns in wartime become shelters for the uprooted. These people do not arrive seeking leisure, but safety. Soon after, armed men appear. They are not disciplined knights in shining armor, but foot soldiers, mercenaries, and irregular fighters. The 100 Years' War increasingly relies on such troops. They travel in bands, sometimes loyal to lords, sometimes operating independently. Their presence changes everything. The tavern keeper greets them carefully, offering drink quickly to prevent confrontation. Soldiers expect service. Refusal can bring violence. The soldiers speak of sieges, of towns changing hands, of payments delayed. Their words reveal the harsh reality of medieval warfare. It is not only battles, but constant disruption. In one corner, a priest sits quietly. Clergy in wartime often travel to provide comfort or manage church property threatened by armies. The priest drinks modestly, observing the room. His presence adds a reminder of moral authority, though even clergy are vulnerable in such unstable regions.
A merchant arrives late, traveling under risk. Trade continues even in war, though reduced and dangerous. He carries cloth and salt, essential goods that remain valuable regardless of conflict. He listens closely for news of road safety. In taverns like this, information is survival. Knowing which lord controls the next town, which bridge is guarded, which road is unsafe can mean life or death. Entertainment is rare here. Minstrels do not travel easily through war zones. Taverns lose their festive character. Instead, they become places of tense rest. The tavern keeper locks the door earlier than usual. Outside, night brings danger. Soldiers, thieves, and desperate refugees move through darkness. Town walls offer some security, but outside them, law is fragile. Upstairs, lodging is crowded. Refugees sleep beside merchants. Soldiers take the best spaces. Privacy disappears entirely. Everyone guards possessions carefully. The tavern's hearth burns low. Smoke rises into dark beams. Silence grows heavier than conversation. This French wartime tavern demonstrates another side of medieval tavern life, not celebration, but endurance. Taverns are not always lively centers of trade and storytelling. In times of crisis, they become shelters where society holds together under strain. The 100 Years' War reshapes France deeply. Taverns in contested regions witness famine, displacement, and fear. Yet they continue operating because people still need food, drink, warmth, and information. By morning, travelers depart quickly. Refugees move onward. Soldiers march again. The tavern keeper cleans benches and prepares once more, uncertain who will arrive next. This is medieval reality in wartime. Ordinary institutions like taverns carrying extraordinary burdens. The medieval tavern remains, whether in peaceful London commerce or French wartime hardship, one of the clearest windows into daily life.